after every question was asked, the Shaykh was just like, haram, haram. La. This one brother got like, he was really upset. He's like, haram, 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 killish haram, ma fi halal. What am I supposed to do?
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of the Prophetic Men-tality podcast. I am your host, Amr Mabrouk, joined by my co-host, Munir, and we have a very special guest for you today from our, if you have not noticed, our new beautiful studio. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh Joe Bradford. Alhamdulillah, it's great to have you here, blessing us in California, Southern California. You've been here for about a week.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Blessed to be here.
Blessed to have you here. The IOK Ilm Intensive, right? So this is not your first time in California, right? You've been coming here multiple times. You've been at Omar Farouk, right? Or not, is it? Yeah, Farouk Masjid, right? And then you've been here a few times. So my first question is, why haven't you just permanently moved down here?
to the better state?
To the better state. I don't know.
Yeah. More halal food options, more hiking options, more beach.
I don't know about that.
Wait,
not the food one, man. But
not the food, really?
Everything else, yeah.
The food scene here has been on it's steady incline.
It's on the up and up.
Yeah.
I'll give you that. It's on the up and up. But you guys have a huge problem, and that is that everything closes at 9 o'clock.
That's true.
I thought that living in
that's because of
the
COVID.
Bible Belt, that would be the case for us in Houston. We can go and get food at 2 a.m. Here I felt like I was living.
We fear
in
God here. I think that's probably what it is. We don't go out late at night.
That must be what it is.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, so alhamdulillah, I'm out there in Houston. I like to come out here every once in a while
To rejuvenate.
Yes.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. That's good. So, on the Prophetic Men-tality podcast, we try to focus on men-related topics. And I think we've covered quite a bit. And the only one we haven't really touched on or talked about at all is anything in regards to, finance, budgeting, money planning, financial intelligence, that kind of thing. And I think right now, more than ever, it is extremely important for the Muslim man to kind of have a better understanding about that whole topic.
Absolutely.
Not just because if you're trying to get married, this is like a big part of your life that you have to handle, but how often it is talked about on the news, fiscal policy, monetary policy. It's all over with the government spending, what you want to vote for in your locale, that kind of thing. That all has a, that whatever you're voting on can have a extreme impact on your personal life. Like for example, like here, we're always voting on, you want to help, this bill is going to help the schools or whatever,
right.
Funding for school. And then all of a sudden gas is $5. And you're like, what? Why is gas $5? Yeah. And then you don't realize that you voted yes, and now gas is $5, right? So, that's kind of the discussion, we want to have. But first, before we get into that, I kind of want to do a quick background check. Not a background check, but
yeah, background check.
Definitely that one.
I'm very confident talking to you guys right now. Hope this is being recorded.
I meant like a quick dive into.
I told you he's an informant. I told you this. It's not the long con. We've checked.
Guys, I'm the one from Egypt here. So I'm the one who gets problems. Just your education history and like why you kind of decided to.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you probably went to study Islam to think, I'm going to be the sheikh that's known for finance. I don't think that's, or maybe it was your trajectory.
So let me give you a story behind that.
Okay.
So I was studying Islam here in the U.S.
When?
I had accepted Islam in 1991, was in high school, started learning Arabic, learned how to read and write, speak. So I was reading, writing, speaking before I had gone.
MashaAllah.
And then attending, durus and visiting scholars that would come in at that time, and then we would have, this is something like now we're like on YouTube and podcasting and stuff like that. At that time, we had cassette tapes and we had something called Ilm Online. And, and that was basically an AT&T conference call number that like 15 masjids all around the country would pay $100 for it. People are like scrounging, like, brother, can you contribute to the Ilm Online? You know, we've got to get this going. Like, how much is it? $1,500. $1,500? No, only $100 from our masjid. I think I can contribute $10. People would put together money, and then they would write a list of questions and fax them to a scholar overseas. And then that scholar would get on the international calling, conference call number. And then we would have, hook this, like put the speaker next to the phone in the masjid and listen, have somebody translate,
Wow.
people that understood, Arabic or Urdu or whatever on one side, and depending upon the person being asked, and then somebody translating it into English on the other side. And so one time we did this Ilm Online thing in Houston. It was all about finance questions. And this is about 1997, 98. And so I remember and I actually still know this brother till today. I remember, after every question was asked, the Shaykh was just like, haram, haram, la, haram, no. So this one brother got like really, he was really upset, and he was like, he's like, haram, 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 killish haram, ma fi halal. What am I supposed to do? I have 7 children. I live in an apartment complex. I can't, if I can't rent. I'm actually illegal renting. Am I not supposed to buy? What do I do? Where are the solutions? And that really hit me. I mean, that was like transformative to hear. I know this guy just like installs cable for a living or something, And I said to myself, I had always been inclined towards like business and entrepreneurship. I was like the guy selling candy out of his backpack in high school, that kind of thing, Yeah. And so I heard that, and I was already into Islamic studies. And I said, you know what? Let me find, if Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is the first ayah of the Quran, Rahmah is so emphasized. This doesn't seem very Rahim, for everything about finance to be not allowed.
Mercy.
Rahmah being mercy. Yeah. So where's the compassion? Where's the mercy about helping people in their financial lives? And it was that was kind of the catalyst to say, I want to specialize in this.
Okay.
Like here's the interest. I went and talked to some of my teachers and mentors and stuff like that. Is there, we hear about this thing that's called like Islamic finance, you can go and check it out. And that was the trajectory from that time. So
this was before you're overseas.
This is before I went overseas.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I went overseas, now it was like, hey, I want to specialize in this.
Okay.
Hey, I have questions about this.
And you studied in school of Medina?
I studied in Medina.
Okay.
So I was in the Faculty of Sharia.
Okay.
It's actually called the Faculty of Sharia and Islamic Studies. Yes. And then I went from there to the master's program in fiqh. And I did my master's in qada, which is the adjudication or the law of the courts, how a judge decides things. And all the while I was sitting with specialists and keeping in contact with them and asking these questions. It was interesting because some of my teachers and mentors that were over there, I used to shadow this one judge in the Medina courthouse, and he would be like, yeah, just leave this. Don't worry about this. You just want to do one thing. You just want to do one thing, finance, just study fiqh in general. Don't worry about just doing this one thing. And then other teachers are like, well, you can't know Islamic finance unless you've studied all of fiqh. So continue, studying fiqh outside the university, inside the university, and specialize in this area because we just have a dearth of people here, and we've got lots of qualified people. So what about where you're from? There's going to be even less people. No. So please specialize in this. And so I kind of took that to heart and kind of made that my thing, So I was doing specialized courses up until, the master's. The master's, my thesis was on adjudication. And that was great because it really rounded me out as far as like applicable fiqh. It wasn't the theory. And then I was picked up by an international Islamic bank to work for them.
Which one is that?
Al-Rajhi Bank.
Okay.
So they're in Saudi, Jordan, Malaysia, Saudi, Jordan, Malaysia, Kuwait, and I think Indonesia as well, and then a few of the other Gulf states. So I was hired as the senior Sharia advisor, and I worked on corporate finance, syndicated finance. I did a few M&A deals. I did a few mutual fund structurings. I did a few retail products with credit cards and things like that. And essentially under the tutelage of a board of scholars that reviewed everything for the bank. Shaykh Abdullah ibn Aqil, rahimahullah, who was like he was like 103 at that time. And still like mind was fresh at that time. Shaykh Abdullah bin Khinain, who was a former chief justice from the courts, who was that, and a number of other scholars.
So these are big hitters. They're not. We're not talking, your local guy. These are big guys.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. So I benefited immensely. So I would have to write research papers, present it to them. They would check my work, tell me where I went wrong. And then I would draft the resolutions for them. They would edit them and then tell me here, edit this, and then we'll sign off on it. So it was a whole process, right? And then after that, after working there, I came back to the States. I came back to the States in about the end of 2012, middle of 2012. And then I noticed that, hey, I've got all this experience and people are asking me about finance, but my experience is institutional. It's corporate. It's not necessarily personal.
Yeah.
The principles are there, but like, how do you understand what people are asking you about? So I went to Rice University and I did the Certified Financial Planner course, which is about a year, intensive about everything that someone needs to know for personal financial planning, tax planning, investment planning, estate planning, all of that. So I did that course and then have basically been kind of working in that field ever since. I still do business work and corporate work, but it's not as much. I get a lot of questions. A lot of people just really want to be, they just want to ask somebody that they feel is independent and that they can trust. Like, I'm not selling anything to anyone. I'm not trying to invest in my fund and then I'll take a percentage.
Gotcha.
I'm fee-based, advice only. And, that's kind of like where I've ended up with this. So, yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it would be sometimes you'd think how do you end up from fiqh to finance? But the finance was always there in the background. Yeah. Because I saw this need in the community, and so I still see that brother until today. Still see him at Jummah. MashaAllah. He's still hustling, selling fried chicken and biryani packages out of the back of his car and stuff like that to make extra money on Jummah, and beautiful guy.
Does he live in a house now, or is he still in an apartment?
He does live in a house. Yes. He does live in a house.
That's what came through for him.
It's beautiful. So you have this education, and for the sake of our audience, there's a lot of ways you could talk about this topic altogether, but a lot of people, let's start from college age. Someone's in college, and the biggest thing people ask obviously is loans. I can't afford college.
Right.
I want to go to a 4-year university. Can I go to the private university and just pull out a loan? Do I have to go to my public? Should I go community? Is it fard on me, obligatory community, then the public university, right? Yeah. Do I have options, or is it one-way track if I'm poor?
Or continuing education.
And we can get to that one too.
Yeah. So I think one important thing to note before we talk about any kind of question is that people's circumstances will always differ.
Yes.
One of the things that we get, I think, a little bit too heavy into in the community is thinking that there's going to be a black and white answer for everything. So, well, the Shaykh said this for my friend, and so I'll just take that and apply it to my life.
Of course.
Your life might be completely different.
Yeah.
I remember a few years on the education question, there are a few brothers that were saying, why are you going to let your kids go and study and take out loans? Parents should just, they should just refi their home and pull out cash, or sell their home and put their kids to, through college. And I remember a good friend of mine who's also a CPA, also a convert. He was like, does this guy realize that not all of us have family members that own homes and can sell them on a whim to be able to put us through college?
Exactly.
So we shouldn't tackle these things as being kind of, that's what I'm looking for.
It's not a universal.
Yes or no.
It's not a binary.
Binary is not universal. Yeah.
This is why you guys are engineers. This is why we've got
exactly why. Told you, extend to my expertise right here.
So
zeros and ones, binary.
What I always encourage people to do that are going into college is, number one, evaluate your options.
No.
A lot of people that are young think that they're very restricted in their options. I've got to go to this private university because if I don't, then I'm not going to get XYZ, prestige or whatever it may be. I would say if you have amazing academic standing and you can only get a certain level of specialization at a private university, there might be some leeway in talking about what the options are.
Like if you want to be a doctor, you can only get it through med school. For example.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't.
You can't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
You can't go anywhere else. But before you get to that point, you can do community colleges. You can, apply for scholarships and grants. You should be trying your most to actually minimize the amount of debt that you're going to be taking on, whether you're going to go through student loans, whether you're going to be taking it from family, try your best to keep the expenses, basically work smart, not hard.
Of course.
I think that's the most important point. Now, this question about student loans, I had asked actually a number of my teachers when I was studying overseas, from Morocco all the way to India. And I purposely went and asked a number of them from different areas of the Muslim world.
You went Maliki, Shafi'i.
Yeah.
You got the Hanafi opinion. You got
the Hanbali.
Okay, mashallah.
Found a guy, I thought he was Lahiri. I was just...
Oh,
wow.
They're even over there. I don't know there's any ones around anymore.
trying to get like the full gambit of opinions.
The hidden fifth school.
And they all pretty much agreed. They said that if there are no other options for a person to fund their education, and they cannot complete their education except by going and getting a student loan, then it's permissible for them to get a student loan up to their need. They shouldn't be trying to take out more, overextend themselves, as in any kind of case of darura or necessity.
Because people do that. They'll take out extra loans, and all of a sudden they're going on trips. They're getting the fanciest laptop, and then they're living in a nicer apartment when they could have taken. You know what I mean? That's what you're kind of referring to.
Yeah, that's what I'm
right?
referring to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't want to live a lifestyle on borrowed money, because eventually that's going to come back to bite you.
Yeah.
I don't think that people realize, when you don't have student loans, your life in your 20s will be drastically different than all of your peers. When you have student loans, you're going to be paying those student loans off well into your 30s and 40s, and some people even 50s, depending upon the loans that they have.
Yeah.
Depending upon the interest rates that are charged on them, depending upon the amount of deferrals that they took. And so, always minimizing the amount of debt and the amount of loans that you take is important. So these scholars said basically, you live in the United States, there are no like Islamic alternatives for you for student loans. If you've exhausted all of your ways to pay for school and you don't have another way, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is narrated in Sunan al-Daraqutni that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-Islamu ya'lu wa la yu'la." Islam succeeds and it is not succeeded. If Muslims don't have education, if they don't have respected places in society, respected positions in society, there will always be a thumb on them. There will always be subjugated or subject to somebody else's will. And that's the last thing that we want. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to be college educated, but everyone has to seek a level of dignity for themselves in what they're doing. And if that means that, hey, I can't finish med school unless I take out a loan, then I take out a loan and I pay that loan off as quickly as possible. Now, I work with a number of physicians that take out loans. And I can tell you that there's generally kind of two, in the Muslim community, I've found two approaches to this.
Okay.
One approach is like, man, I'm so far in debt, I just, I just treat it like a monthly payment and I don't even bother, right? And the problem with that is that the more debt that you take on, the more debt you have to take on to keep that lifestyle. So
because you're limiting your cash flow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate from med school, you finally got a salary. You're living the doctor life. You upgrade the car, the house, probably the wife. Probably
you're a resident, but you get a few more years, and then you.
Yeah. But and then you've got other people who say, you know what, I'm going to continue my lifestyle as a medical student well through residency and thereafter until I have absolutely no debt. Then I'll treat myself. And they're able to actually get rid of that debt a lot faster because depending upon the type of student loan that you have, your interest might be calculated weekly, maybe even daily, which means that you will
on the day you took it out 6
Yes.
years ago.
So you will not get out of that debt because essentially you have this avalanche of interest that's following you. You know, it'll take, well, I shouldn't say you won't, but it'll take so much longer. Yeah. So, you know, minimizing the amount that you do. And also a lot of this is not, it's less about having the loan than it is the lifestyle that you choose to live.
Okay.
You know, am I going to go and upgrade the car, upgrade the house, you know?
So someone might ask, is there, so not halal and haram, let's not talk about that, but like just how about the blessings in that? Is there a difference? Like, all right, there's two different ways to the end. They're both going to get out of debt, one in 5 years, one in 20 years, out of debt, right? What's the difference?
I mean, there's definitely an issue with the barakah that you'll see in your life. You know, the Prophet ﷺ used to seek refuge from debt every morning and every evening. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-ma'tham wal-maghram. Allah, I seek refuge in you from sinfulness and from indebtedness. A'udhu bika min qahr al-rijal wa ghalabat ad-dayn. I seek refuge in you from subjugation by man and the overpowering nature of debt. And so, you know, people don't realize that there's a psychological connection that you will have. And that psychological connection that you have to having an impending bill means that you just have that less amount, you know, that less, how can I even say, I can't even speak English right now. You'll have that
mental clarity.
That much less.
You know,
yeah, mental. I think I need like a little bit more coffee.
Shaykh, we got like 4 more.
So you'll have that much more or that much less freedom in your life because you're looking, you're always worried about, you know, an impending payment. You're always worried about it. And if you don't, and the thing is if you worry about it, great. But if you don't worry about it, that's even worse because then everything just continues to snowball. I mean, I know a lot of people that'll just, you know, they'll put everything on their credit card. They'll pay the minimum on the credit card and they think that they're fine. And in reality, that just makes it even worse.
20% interest.
Yeah. So you're paying 20% interest with your credit card that's paying, you know, all of your other bills that are probably snowballing as well and have rates on them. And it's just this huge avalanche until you get to the point where it's unsustainable and you want to start doing things for yourself and you can't. And I actually know in the Muslim community, there's a very deep sense of duty towards one's parents and one's siblings and family in general. And so I have actually seen cases where not only are people struggling because of their own financial misgivings as far as taking on debt and interest, but they're also assuming the debt and the interest of their parents and their siblings as an idea of duty towards them, having mental breakdowns and literally like, okay, I need to budget and get out of debt, but can you refer me to a therapist because I can't handle this? They feel like I'm sitting on both sides. I'm not taking care of my family, and I'm also involved.
Taking on interest.
I'm also involved in riba. So,
wow, that's a psychological component that I don't think we even thought about getting into, and I honestly didn't even consider. It never even crossed my mind that this is what people are dealing with.
So I have another question. Same demographic, we'll say. And this won't apply to everyone either, but some people, because it's hard to get a credit card when you're in college because you have no history of anything, but some people can get it through their parents, right? Piggyback off them. And so for the longest time, I never had a credit card. But that was also because I had a big misconception about what they are. I mean, it's just like, oh, it sounds like there's interest in this. I don't want to deal with this, whatever else. But if someone can get the smallest credit card they can and use it responsibly, is that something you encourage in college, or it's like just spend your means? If you have a debit card, you can only spend your means, right? So is there any difference in that?
So there are a few things that go into that. Number one is debt versus deficit spending. You always want to be deficit spending, meaning that you want to be spending based upon the cash flow that you have. You're spending to your means.
Yes.
No.
You're not spending more than you have available. What the credit card allows you to do is actually prepay some of your expenses as your money's coming into your account, and then you just pay down the card. With the debit card, you're only limited to
What's
whatever's in
physically
your
account.
account. Now that can cause issues sometimes when you need to pay a bill, and you're not going to get money until 10 days later.
I've had that.
You're gonna have to negotiate.
Insufficient funds. Like, I'll just call the bank and tell them. That was one off. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing is, so it's the deficit versus debt spending. Another thing is that with certain types of purchases and rentals, you're going to get a certain level of warranty and guarantee by the credit card company.
Yes.
So if you rent a car and you use a Visa, then Visa actually gives you rental insurance on top of that, because they want to make sure that the payments are protected through their network. Now, Islamically, right? A lot of people say, well, if I'm using a credit card, am I doing something haram? The extension of credit in and of itself is not impermissible Islamically. The Prophet ﷺ took out debt, he borrowed from others, he paid them back. Where does it fall awry, right? It's when you don't pay back and then those amounts are rolled over, and then the issuing bank, not Visa, right? So not Visa. If let's say you have
Capital One, Chase.
let's say you have like an Amazon Chase Visa card.
I literally that's the one.
So that's actually 3 relationships that you have with a credit card. So you have a relationship with Amazon, right? You're getting the points and all of that. You have a relationship with Visa, which provides the network for the fund transfer and things like that. And then you have a relationship with Chase, which is what's called the issuing bank.
Yes.
The idea of paying interest only comes when the issuing bank gets involved after you didn't pay back Amazon, you didn't pay it back over Visa, and now these amounts were like rolled over from July to August.
Yeah.
That's where that's where the interest gets charged. Before that, it's really just, oh, hey, we're going to front you until you pay us back, and you'll use our payment network. So does the presence of that condition that you would pay the issuing bank interest, does that invalidate the contract? This is a classical issue in Islamic law. Is there severability in contracts? Meaning that if I have an entire contract and one stipulation, one line in there is actually not allowed, does that invalidate the entire contract or just that stipulation? Mm-hmm. And perhaps the stronger of the two opinions is that it does not invalidate the contract, that the contract is permissible, and that it moves forward as is. And this is based on the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, when she freed a slave woman named Barira, and Barira's family said, well, you can free her, but we want you to give us her wala, or her allegiance. And this was an early system of kind of like social support. Mm-hmm. So when a person was emancipated, then they would take the name of the family that freed them, or they would take the tribal affiliation of the people that freed them, and they would inherit from them and inherit to them, right? So they kind of became part of the family. So they weren't this like sore thumb sticking out in society. There was a part of the framework that was supporting them. So the family said, well, you can free her, Aisha, but she attaches to our support system. Aisha's like, no, if I'm freeing somebody, they're going to attach to my support system. She goes to the Prophet ﷺ and tells him about what they're saying. And he says to her, اعتقيها واشترطي لهم الولاء فكل شرط ليس في كتاب الله فهو باطل ولو كان 100 شرط. Go and free her and give them the condition that they're asking for, because every condition that is not in accordance with God's laws is false, even if it's 100 conditions. And then he went out and he gave a khutbah and he chastised people for making those types of conditions. So the idea here is that he allowed that contract to move forward, even though it had an improper or an invalid condition. So your credit card, going back to your original question, should you be getting a credit card? I say yes. And if you are in high school or college, the best way to do this is this depends if your parents are responsible. Yes. That's a big part of it. But if your parents have credit, or you have a trusted sibling or a friend that has credit, then what you should do is have them add you to their credit card as an authorized user. A credit card will be issued in your name and sent to them. Mm-hmm. And then they can use that. Now, what I really advocate college kids do is get that authorized user credit card, and then start to pay for your bills with that card. Now, sometimes it's better to actually leave it in the hands of your parents. Like if your parents are helping pay for your books and tuition and stuff, or maybe there's a bill in the house that they can pay with it, the money's going to come from their account inevitably if you don't pay it. So just leave it with them so you're not tempted to go and charge things up. And that's going to do two things. That's going to, number one, build you a credit history. But number two, it's going to build you a credit history based on your parents' credit history. So if your parents have a credit history of 10, 15 years, you're automatically tacking on to that 10, 15 years. So if you're an authorized user for them for a year, then a year or a year and 6 months, then you basically get like the whole credit history of your parents. So instead of starting out, after college with a credit score of like 400 or something or 300, you're probably going to be like at 600, 700.
And then you can get that 0% interest car loan.
I'm not a big fan of the credit system. I think the way that the credit is calculated is actually calculated in a way that disenfranchises many people that have the ability to pay. It can be very subjective because people say no, it's completely objective. It's based on consumer spending, it's based on utilities, it's based on utilization rate. Well, if you can't become a homeowner and you can't rent in certain areas, then your utilities are going to be meaningless. So your score automatically goes down. If you don't have access to consumer credit, you can't get access to consumer credit, so it goes down. So I'm not saying that this is a perfect system or that it's one that's, and I think that's important to clarify for the listeners. It's very much a function of, do I want to have access to certain things later in life, and that will make it easier for me and will take some of the liability off of me? It's like if you go and rent a car with a debit card, first time you get into an accident or anything like that, they're just going to pull that money from your account. You're not going to see that until it clears and they decided that, you weren't at fault, and then they might pay you back minus the fees that it took them to go and transfer all of that. With a credit card, they're not going to be able to do that because you have a very strong party advocating on your side, to warranty whatever you're doing.
Yeah. I think it's probably the biggest advantage I've found out was having a credit card is just when big things happen like that, or like, for example, I had to travel to interview for a job and like, you pay the plane ticket and all that. Because I was in Medina, Texas. So I flew to SoCal, like, you pay for that and rental, but then we'll just pay you back. It's like, all right, fine. I did that. And it took them like 2 months to pay me back. And I was like, you guys need to pay me back now, or I have rent. Like, it's going down. If it was a credit card, though, I wouldn't have that stress. Like such a huge difference. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think just the stress levels, as long as you have to be responsible, know yourself, right?
So anybody that takes a credit card has to keep a couple of things in mind. Number one is deficit spending. Do not spend more than you have in your account or that you're making on a month. Number two is understand the difference between fixed expenses and variable expenses. And then number three.
Wait, so what's an example of a fixed expense?
A fixed expense is something that so it's defined in a couple different ways.
Yeah.
Some people say, a fixed expense is something where the amount is the same every month.
Like a phone bill.
No. The amount is the same. So I have a bill of $150 every month. That's fixed. I have a bill for another company that might be $75 one month, might be $175
electric bills
one month.
Change, yeah.
Right. I look at it differently. I don't think the money, the monetary amount is important. What's important is, if I don't pay this bill, will like my life fall apart? That's a fixed expense.
Yeah.
So my light bill, my electricity bill might go from $175 in the winter in Texas to $300 in the summer in Texas. I'm saying in Texas because in California, you guys are looking at me like,
175 is like the peak of the peak here.
Could be like $600 during the summer.
$600 here during the summer
for electricity if you
are.
have the AC on.
And if you're like in the Central Valley and you're running the AC all day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then it'd be like Houston, Texas.
Okay, then it'd be like Houston, Texas. Sorry, Central Valley people. So if I have to pay that bill regardless.
Yes.
Right. But I don't necessarily have to have the same amount of groceries every month. I don't necessarily have to have, my waste management. I don't know if you guys have to pay for waste management. My waste management might be paid every 3 months instead of every month, something like that. So fixed is going to be where if I don't pay it, my life falls apart. Variable is going to be those things that fluctuate and are above and beyond my basic necessities. Now, the importance of understanding the difference between those two things is if I'm saving and I say I know that my fixed costs are $2,500 a month, but my total spend every month is $4,000, then I can basically cut back by $1,000, $1,500 every month if necessary. Go back to like the basics, and
peanut butter sandwiches.
And rough it for a while because of, some type of need, So with the credit cards, don't spend more than you have, spend according to your means.
And budget. It sounds like people probably don't consider that.
They don't. They think that their credit card is like a budgeting service. So I pay with my credit card and I pay the minimum. If you pay the minimum, which might be like $25 or $50,
you could have like a $4,000 balance and it's a $30 payment, and then you think, oh, I'm good for the month, and it's
and you start looking at the interest charges and how they roll over, and you'll be paying that for like forever, and depending upon the time that goes by, the interest rate, gets even bigger. So,
well, thank you. So that's probably the first step. So we have a credit card. We've graduated college. We're paying off loans, or hopefully not in debt. Probably the minorities like that, but inshallah, you're paying off those loans. And I'm at my first job, and they're sitting like, "Hey, congrats! You're just so happy to have your first job." They start putting paperwork in front of you, signing off on all these weird things, health insurance, dental, and all of a sudden they're like 401k. And you're like, I don't know what this is.
Right?
Do you want it or not? 6% of your paycheck. We'll match it by 2%. Invest over so many periods. You're like, no, yes, I don't know. How much is coming out of my paycheck? What does that mean? So what? You go into a typical corporate American job, they're going to say, we have these type of accounts, retirement accounts. What's the deal with these things?
Okay, so 401ks are something that are generally included in what they call the defined benefits program. And a defined benefits program means that your employer is going to define for you the types of benefits or things that they're going to give you in addition to your salary. Now, sometimes they pay for those in total, and sometimes they contribute to them along with you, and sometimes they just provide you a program to contribute to. Depending upon where you work, that can be different. That can be a pension where the company pays for everything. That can be a 401k where the company is going to contribute money into an account, and you're going to contribute money into an account, and then that's going to be invested. And if you stay with the company for a certain amount of time, what they call a vesting period, which is usually 1 to 3 years. After that 1 to 3 years, even if you leave the job, you get to take that money with you.
Yeah.
So the money the company invested.
The money the company invested.
You would always keep yours.
Always keep yours, yeah. So if you're putting in $100 a month, they're putting $100 a month. By the end of the year, you've got $2,400, right? So if you walk away before the end of the year, and let's say your vesting period is 3 years, well, you haven't met the minimum amount of time you're hired, so you can only take $1,200 because it's yours.
Yeah.
The other $1,200 is theirs. But if you stay for the vesting period, then you take
you.
all of it. Now, during that time, they're going to take that money and they're going to...
Who's they?
The company. So the company is going to hire a fund manager. And that fund manager is usually going to be, some large investment company like BlackRock or Vanguard, or they might have smaller fund managers as well. It really depends on who the size of the company and who they're involved with. And that fund manager is then going to take your money that's deducted from your paycheck every month, and they're going to put it into investments. And depending upon the company you work for, the fund manager, and the options that they allow, they might force you into an investment that is not the best for you, financially or Islamically. They might give you complete freedom to decide where you want to invest that in something that nowadays is more and more being called a personal choice account, also called a self-directed account, or a brokerage link account. All three of those names are similar. So you basically would You take the money is then put into investments that you choose instead of the fund manager choosing them. So when you're, the important one thing that's very important for people that are starting out their careers to understand is if you don't take the money from the 401k, you're, like if, let's say for example, the match is like 5% of your income for the year,
It's pretty good.
Yeah. So which means that if you contribute 5% of your income, they're going to put in another 5%. What's the average salary out here?
100K for Orange County, probably.
Okay, so 5% of 100K is what?
$5,000
$5,000. So you're actually walking away with $10,000 a year. Then that I don't want to say you did nothing for, but it's pretty much free money, right? So I've seen a lot of people that say, I don't know if a 401k is halal or haram. I'm just not going to touch it, right? They will generally give you, after you sign on to a company, they're generally going to give you a bit of time to make the decision. One thing you have to be very, very, and again, this goes back to like the psychological issues. In the financial world, there's always pressure to sign. There's always pressure to close. Just sign this. Don't worry about it. Just sign it. You can change it later. Don't worry about it. There's an enrollment period. But you can always sign. You can always complete the signatures before the very last day of the enrollment period. So never feel pressure to go and sign something that you don't understand. Take the paperwork, read through it, sit with HR, get in touch with the fund manager, and say, "Hey, explain this to me. Are there any company trainings on this? How do I know what it is?" The basic thing is that it's an investment account that is tax advantaged for you. It was created by Congress. They tell companies, hey, if you help your employees save for retirement, we're going to give you tax breaks. That's why the companies do the match. If you help them save for retirement, we're going to give you tax breaks. We're going to allow them to put it into the account before they pay taxes on the money, and they'll only withdraw it when later in life, when they're
55 and a half, 59 and a half, something like that, right?
59 and a half. Yeah, I believe different accounts have different withdrawal ages.
Yeah.
But what if, for example, that this company they're putting all this, they're putting your 401k in bonds, government issued bonds. They're putting them in, you see the stock portfolio, and it's and that's everything on the BDS list. Like what, and you have no control really. But this is your retirement plan,
and that's a real thing. So So you have to look at, number one, generally they're not going to force you into just one fund.
Okay.
They're going to say, okay, here's a selection. We prefer this one. We prefer this target date, 2065 fund for you. Well, why do they prefer that? Because they have a lot of control over what goes into that fund. It starts out heavy in equities. It moves with bonds, and then it moves towards fixed income and bonds at the end. So apparently, it's more stable at the end of of your life. But they also get better fees from pushing you into those, right? So what you have to do is you have to be insistent and say, "Look, I'm not going to invest in things that go against my values as a Muslim. I want to, you don't have to wear it on your shoulder, on your sleeve, and say that to them. Say, look, I don't like any of these investment options. I want to invest the money myself, or I want to have somebody invest it for me. How do I do that?"
And they can give you that option.
They can give you that option. I have found many times that HR reps don't know that option's there, so you have to press them for it. And even the customer service people from fund managers are kind of hesitant to do that because they know that they're probably going to make less on fees. Or they'll tell you, well, if you do that, there's an associated fee. Do you really want to pay fees? And then it comes out, it's like $25 a year or $50 a year. I've never seen it more than $75 a year,
which is nothing. About thousands of dollars.
Exactly, to have your own selection of funds. So yeah, I mean, when if you are looking, if you're a young Muslim man and you want to, because this is the prophetic mentality, right?
He knows where he's at. Inshallah.
So if you want to, if you want to be saving up for a family, if you want to own a home later in life, if you want to put money away for medical education, then taking that 401k match and using it is very important. Now, if your company gives you a 401k and doesn't give you a match, don't invest.
It's pointless. You can go get your own. You can go to Wahid, get your own fund.
Exactly. You can go to Wahid, you can go to Sharia Portfolio.
Yeah,
you
Sharia.
can just open up a Fidelity account and invest in a amount of mutual funds and make more than putting it in the 401k.
The one thing is, though, the one disadvantage to that, I would say, is that your money doesn't come out pre-tax.
If you do a traditional IRA, it'll come out pre-tax.
You can do a traditional IRA by yourself without your company's involvement, and
That's
the money
right.
can come out.
That's right. Independent retirement account. So the Roth IRA would be post-tax,
Okay.
but the traditional would be pre-tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so there are options out there. I think though that it's I see a lot of people kind of leaving money on the table because they don't explore the options. And then they say, well, my company doesn't give me personal choice options. I can't invest it on my own, or I have to have, all of it or a portion of it, in things which I find objectionable. What do I do with that at that juncture? And that question can only be answered after kind of looking at what the fund options are and developing a personalized strategy for that person. So for example, their company might say, yeah, you can invest on your own, your own choice, 90% of your portfolio, but we're going to mandate that you still keep 10% of it with us, and we have a mixed equities, fixed income, portfolio. Okay, what do you do about that 10%? How is it characterized, ethically, Islamically, as versus the 90%? And there's ways that can be dealt with at that time, but it is very much an individual.
Okay.
And I just want to stress that for everyone listening, you really do, if you're not already taking advantage of these accounts in your workplace, or you're not doing something by yourself, you need to, because a lot of our parents, that when they came overseas to work here, a lot of them ended up working for the government, right? They're government employees. And as a government employee, I'm a government employee, right? You don't necessarily really have to worry about this because you're automatically part of a pension plan, right? You're not, they're like, this is the plan you get when you sign up, and khalas, at 55, you get 80% of your salary if you're retired, that kind of thing. But since many of us now are in the private corporate world, not many people my age are in the government. There's not many pension plans.
That's right.
Anymore. It's mainly these 401k, IRA retirement accounts. So if you are not savvy in that regard, it will bite you.
Yeah, if you're in the medical field, 403B, 457A, those are the same, basically treated the same way as a 401k.
And even if you're a doctor, you think I'm going to have a buttload of money later. No, if you're not managing your money well now, you could end up, broke down the line. So
most doctors make about $6 million average in the United States
over their life.
Okay. And I think the majority of them only end up with $250,000 at retirement.
Yeah. See, that's
because of interest, debt, lifestyle choices.
I'll tell you.
Wow.
Protect us. So I have another work-related one. So this one came up also during my kind of onboardings. Stock option plans or whatever. You come into a job and they say, look, our company is publicly traded. We have a stock, whatever that is. And we would like to, and if you buy our stock every quarter, we put your money in this thing. We just take a little bit from your check and you can buy our stock at 15% off. And then if you wait a vesting period, 1, 2, 3, whatever years, then you can cash it out for the new higher price, because the company you invested in a company, it's going to go up. Everything's great, right? So you should be making 15% minimum or more. So a lot of people say, first of all, like, what are stocks? And like, I hear these are haram, and it's like, it's all risk based, right? We don't like to do risk in Islam or whatever else. So what can you tell us about that?
So risk is inherent to any business. Risk is not something which is halal or haram. It just is. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Rasulullah, inna al-as'ara qad irtafa'at fil madinati fasa'ir lana. He said, oh, Messenger of Allah, the prices have gone up in Medina, so set prices for us. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Inna Allah huwa al-musa'ir, al-qabid al-basit biyadihi al-amr. وإني لأرجو الله أن ألقاه وليس علي مظلمة في مال ولا دم. He said, Allah is the one who sets prices. He is al-qabid, the one who grasps, and the one, and wal-basit, the one who gives. In his hand is the affair. So it's almost this, this invisible hand type of thing, right?
Who else said that? Invisible hand? Someone else said that.
Some Adam guy.
It's a president.
Adam Smith, not a president. Yeah, so Adam Smith's invisible hand theory.
He got it from the Prophet. Okay.
Well, there were Muslim scholars that were talking about this idea of market forces and the unseen market forces before that, but well before him. So he says, so I hope to meet Allah and I have not wronged anyone in their wealth or their persons. So the idea of risk is inherent. A lot of Muslims make the mistake in thinking that it's not, unless it's risk-free, it's not Islamic. That's actually the opposite. If it is risk-free, it's probably haram, because you're guaranteeing a return without taking any liability, and so your rewards are contingent upon the risk that you take. The compensation is contingent on the liability that you hold. However, a stock unit. All right, or a unit of a joint stock company, in the simplest terms, is simply just a representation of your involvement in a partnership with other people. So if a company divides itself up into 100 different units and they sell you one of those units, you now own 1/100th of that company. If if they have 1 billion of those units, and you're 1/1000th of that company. And now that company now represents you in two ways. It represents you in the types of products that it makes, so it's business ventures, and it represents you in the way that it manages its internal finances.
Yeah.
And so as long as it is involved in halal business activities and is managing itself ethically and Islamically, then it's permissible to invest in. Now with stock options, restricted stock units, and so forth, there's a few things that we have to talk about. So some companies are offering RSUs and stock options, so restricted stock units. They'll say, we're going to give you, in lieu of cash, we're going to give you a certain number of shares in our company, but those are not going to vest until a certain period. They're going to be locked up. You can't sell them or put them in your portfolio until a certain amount of time. Yeah. Those are simply, if you work for a company where you find out that maybe the company's business activities are okay, but the financials are kind of off the wall. You're not personally responsible for the financial management as an employee, but when you own that stock, you're now a part owner. So treat the RSUs basically same as cash if you find out that the stock is not Sharia compliant.
So all this stuff could get really, really complicated for the average user. There's a few organizations, websites we can check that analyze each stock, right?
Yeah. So you can check out Zoya.finance.
Zoya.finance.
Full disclosure, I'm the Sharia advisor to Zoya.finance.
Yeah. So you're literally going stock by stock and checking income statements for each company and doing an analysis to find out if this is Sharia compliant or not.
If I was in the 1990s, yes. I was kidding. So we've automated a lot of it. So
okay.
It's so we set the standards. We do physical physical
either
audits.
Automated or if it's someone physical doing it, but each one is individually.
Yeah, each one is individually. Yeah. So we have a data stream. Mm-hmm. We parse that data stream algorithmically, and then we go back and kind of randomly take a look at the conclusions that are brought up because of stocks. Because sometimes, some components in the data stream are not one-to-one with what's in our system. Mm-hmm. And we always want to make sure that we're giving the most accurate.
And you're doing this quarterly, yearly?
Daily.
Wow.
Yeah, the data comes in daily. And
so what if one company one day is legit and then I check next week and...
Well, the data comes in daily. The score is developed depending upon, the standards. So for example, the amount of debt might change from time to time or from when it's reported, but we'll take the market cap of the company based on the last reported amount so that we're not getting these wild fluctuations.
Okay.
Because of, I don't want to go too deep into like
how you calculate.
Yeah. How calculation standards and all of that. But yeah, it can get a little sticky, and you can if you want to educate yourself on how to do those calculations in Excel, that's very easy to do. Well, I shouldn't say very easy to do, but the information is out there.
Yeah.
If you want to use Zoya, who I'm part of, you can use that. There's another app called Islamically. They do something very similar. The standards are a little bit different, but you can go and check on those companies.
But the idea is to pick one and stick with it. You pick one standard and you stick with it, and you should be.
Yeah, you should be okay.
You should be okay.
You should be okay.
At least as long as you're trying your best, which is another important.
Yeah, I mean, you have to try, and it's very important to be intentional about these types of things, and not just I looked at this app, it said it's halal. I looked at that app, it said it's haram. I'm gonna go with one that's halal because
it's a good deal. It's coming up.
Yeah,
I actually remember something you said about that. I think it may have been on one of your YouTube videos. You were talking about zakat, and you were saying that when you pay your zakat, you need to be intentional with it, and you need to do the right calculation. Because a lot of people, I'm myself included, maybe I'm not like looking too closely, but I'm going to be like, oh, well, I'm going to pay this much because I know I'm overpaying here, which is okay, I guess. But you don't go pray Salat al-Dhuhr and you're like, well, I'm just going to pray 5 rakahs, no, it's 4, right? You pray 4 because you need to, that's what it is. So, I think that point about being intentional about your finances is very important. It forces you to kind of have a grasp on your situation.
Yeah, know exactly what you owe, what you own, what you're going to be doing with it. And then if you want to do more, then you can always
this is
do
my
more.
fard and this is my extra. You should know that. I think. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So back to the question about like restricted stock units. If it's given to you as part of your compensation package and you find out that the company is out of compliance, then when you receive them, sell them, save them. The same as cash. You're basically just taking something that was going to be given to you in cash and was given to you in that. If it's stock options, if the company is permissible, then you can exercise those stock options, buy them at a discount, and then profit from that. If it's not, then you want to go and evaluate the compliance of the company before you do that.
Yeah, that's really important because you hear, especially now because you have apps like Robinhood or whatever, Acorn and all these other things. So younger people can start investing, right? And what they don't realize is they find out, okay, stocks are halal, it's fine. Like I'm just a part owner of a business. That's how it all works. But then they'll say like, oh, have you heard like aircrafts are going to be on the up and up now because airlines were all down for a year. So they buy them now. But then you look at their ratings and it's like they're all in debt. That's not compliant. First of all, it's not even a good investment.
Right. They make a lot of revenue off of alcohol. People don't realize that.
Exactly. So they're just buy.
International airlines, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So people don't realize, they think, well, stocks are halal. They don't think the play-by-play airplanes are halal. What do you tell me airplanes aren't halal? Like I'm flying. Why is that haram?
Right.
So I think that's a very important aspect of intentionality, looking at each one individually.
It's like saying, well, wheat is halal, water is halal, hops is halal, yeast is halal. Put them all together. Beer is halal.
Makes sense. Just cut that part out, please.
But that's not the case, right? So the idea is
Twitter, here we come.
The idea is that the whole is not the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
So it can completely different. It can be completely different.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, again, this is like another thing. It's a mathematical principle, right? But Muslim scholars of fiqh have talked about it. They call it qa'idat al-jam' wal-farq. That the whole is not the sum of its parts, and how that affects legality and stuff like that. Nerdy asides, but anyway.
Okay, I think that kind of rounds out the questions for the young professional working. Or did you have one more?
I have one. Well, I don't know. Maybe this is the same general question you might have, which will lead probably to your question. I know what you're thinking.
What?
But let's first we need to define a term, and then we can probably get to the homes, is what I'm going to assume you're going to ask about.
Yeah.
So there's this thing called Riba in Islam.
Yes.
This thing of money coming out of nowhere, or it's just interest, right? I hear if I see a percentage, they say $10, 2% interest, haram. Never going to touch this again. Credit cards, cashback, haram. Anything with money to money, haram. Is that how Riba works? Is that the definition of interest or usury? Is that just anywhere I see that word, avoid?
So it's a little bit more nuanced than that.
Interesting.
It's a little bit more nuanced than that. Interest is an accounting term, and it means anything that's above and beyond capital. And that could be a profit from a legitimate business agreement. It could be money that's paid on top of a loan. Both are considered capital. Both are considered amounts above capital. So it's not true that every time you see the word interest that it equates to riba. Most of the time, however, so I don't want anybody to like take this like a football and run with it, right? It's most of the time you will. But for example, you might see a car lease and it'll say interest rate, and you're not paying any interest whatsoever as far as, you know, more cash for the cash you contributed.
Yes.
Now you put a down payment, you got the car, they're charging you daily a rate for the use of that car. That's where that comes into. Excuse me. Whereas, you know, if you go and get a working capital loan from a bank, yeah, you're taking money and then you're going to have to pay back that principal and more money on top of it. So it's money for money.
So this is the differences in the first scenario. It's car for money. You got the car and you're paying for it more over a longer period of time.
That's
Whereas with the bank, you received money and you're paying back money. And they're making
right.
money on the money.
So it's money for money.
Let's use an example. I want to sell you this water bottle. There's two ways I could sell it to you. I could say, Sheikh Joe, today, $5.
Okay.
Or, you say I don't have $5, but I'm getting paid on Friday. So, all right, you want it by Friday? I can give it to you today, but you're going to pay me $20 on Friday.
Okay.
Is that riba? Am I increasing money out of nowhere, or is that permissible?
No, it's permissible because you're taking into consideration the time value or the value of the time that you're extending to me to be able to pay over that time.
But I'm also giving you a fixed amount, which is probably the thing.
However, the one caveat here is that if we walk away, we have to walk away agreeing to one price.
Perfect.
If we walk away agreeing to two prices, where you say, "Hey, it's $5 today, it's $20 by the end of the week," is it? Did you say $20? It's a very expensive bottle of water.
California, we're in a drought.
So, if we walk away with two prices, you are obliged to give me the lower price at all times. Otherwise, the amount that you take is riba.
Very interesting. Okay, mashallah. Now, people might say, what's the difference? I'm getting a home or whatever. Let's not use a home because that's more nuanced.
Well, that's kind of what
which we'll get to. But let's say I'm buying this camera from Am right now. And I'm buying it. I can buy it from Am, and he's going to sell it to me for $100 in a week. Or I go to this store. The store says, we can give you this camera for $10 today, and say, no, I need it by the end of the week. And Am is $100. And they do a calculation. Say, we're going to do 2% this time. Okay, well, by the end of the week, it's going to equal $100. And is that the same thing? Or is that one riba, or is that actually...
Well, where'd you get the money from?
Well, it depends. It depends highly on, do they own the camera or not?
Okay.
All right. So if
camera store owns the camera.
Yeah. So if the camera store owns a camera,
but they're working with a bank to finance the purchase, so they get paid.
Well, there's a couple of different levels to that.
Yeah.
Right. So if the camera store owns a camera and they calculate it and they say, yeah, this is the uptick on on the price that we're going to have to see to be able to extend credit to you, for you to be able to walk out of it here with it today and pay us over time. There's no problem. They're the owners of that.
It's kind of like a car too. I think people don't realize, if you just straight up buy a car from Toyota, from Toyota Finance, or Honda from Honda Finance, that's the same thing as they're giving you a car. Just they're funding it themselves.
Yeah, and the reason why they create things like Toyota Finance or Honda Finance or whatever, it's not because they necessarily want to be financing people. It's because they want to be able to get the tax breaks.
Oh.
So they actually. If they can create a business,
and they have debt.
Yeah, if they create a business and it's a debt instrument, then not only do they get to profit off of it, but they also get to write it off. So they're writing off expenses as a manufacturer, they're writing off expenses as a dealer, they're writing off expenses as a financing arm. And so they see more of the profit and give you a better price.
So they're giving me 0%, but in reality, they just got a fat tax write-off of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I thought they're just trying to be nice. Man,
no one's nice.
even if it's not 0%, they're still making, and they're giving you a better deal, and they're selling you something that they own. Now, this is different than, say, if I go to Toyota, I want to buy it, and I go to my local credit union or bank, and I get money from them. So now I've borrowed money with an interest rate that I'm paying back to them. But where does the car come in? The car, a lien is put on the car or the home, right? And essentially, the creditor, the lender, says, "Look, you're going to pay me back my money. If you don't pay me back my money, then I'm going to come and take your home or your car, or whatever is, sell it, and then get my money back."
Okay.
So that's the difference between the two.
But someone might say, and I've heard this argument, how about if those prices are exactly the same? If the bank, I take the money from the bank, or I take the money from Toyota Finance, like at the end of the day, I'm still going to pay $25,000 for my Camry. Why is it different? I'm paying the same amount.
The liabilities are different. The liabilities and the amount of equity and the way that car might be repossessed is completely different.
All right, so that's one important aspect. I think one Shaykh Farhan, he put it this way, which I think really like put in perspective for me. He said, yeah, you're right. You as an individual paid exactly the same amount, same time for everything. But let's say you conceive a child the day before your nikah, the day after your nikah. The due date probably might end up the exact same day. Baby, and you're both married 9 months later. Who's going to know the difference? But
yeah, so it's a moral dimension.
Exactly. All right. So now we're slowly defining riba, and it's not just interest, but typically in America it is. And how you finance things matter. There's barakah. It could be the same amount at the end. Last question, because this is also one I've gotten about riba. Well, if you're dealing with inflation rates, money inherently has riba in it. So what's the big deal? Like if I take a loan, don't take a loan.
We're off the gold standard.
So like my money is changing percentages every year anyway. I don't spend it; it's still going to lose value. So if I pull out a loan, who cares?
The question is not if that's a reality. That's always a reality, even with gold. So is gold not inflationary? No, it is. It just has a slower rate of inflation, a slower rate of change than fiat currencies.
But the before we got off the gold standard, the price of gold was mainly fixed until they found more gold. Right?
Until they found more gold, but,
right? That's kind of
well.
Or is my knowledge of history not right?
So there's a few things there. Number one is that yes, the amount of gold was fixed, but there was what was called representative currencies.
Yes,
fulus. They were representative of gold. There was a lot of fraud and a lot of deception, even with gold. The books of the fuqaha are full of, what do you do with a dananir and magshusha? What do you do with fraudulent dananir where lead was put inside of them, where the edges were carved off so that the people could just slightly devalue it, So the issue really has to do with, how is the money supply managed? That is a big problem of, just injecting money into printing dollars and putting it into the money supply. And there's a lot more that can be said about that. But when we're talking about a personal finance perspective,
gotcha.
Somebody can come and say, well, yeah, sure, because of inflation, because of interest rates, I'm being affected, therefore I'm going to go and do this. Well, you're not the only person affected. Everybody's being affected by inflation. So to use that as an excuse for, well, I'm just going to go ahead and take out loans, it doesn't necessarily have a bearing on your personal decision to go into debt and to give up more of the value and worth that you have to other people. Those are two disparate, topics.
Okay. Well, let's get to the main crux of why I wanted to have you here.
I did not know about this. I thought you just wanted to get to know you, meet you as
That's
a
what
person.
I thought too. I don't know.
Individual. All right, go ahead on.
Yeah.
So I'm a civil engineer.
Okay.
I understand a little bit about development. I understand how to put things up off the ground, right?
Okay.
And I'm of average intelligence.
Okay.
So my wife and I, we can each go and get 2 first-time homeowner loans. We can go out to the Midwest. We can get 2 homes, right? $300K each, putting on 3%, which is manageable. And then we can rent them out and generate some passive income.
Sure.
Right? And then when we get enough passive income, we can use that, build up another 10%, get another one, and keep doing that until we build up a real estate portfolio till it's about a few $1,000,000, and I can quit my job. I could do this full time.
Okay.
And there's a fatwa from Dar al-Ifta that says mu'amalat al-bankiyya halal. It's all good. And I'm just getting a loan from a bank and I'm leveraging the home against it. Maybe I have an LLC at this point and it's not my name anymore. It's an LLC. It's a business entity. I'm my own person. That's a business entity. Maybe I have a non-Muslim business partner and the loan's in his name. The interest is not affecting me. Why can't I just do that?
It's so oddly specific.
It's not oddly specific. No, because I've been thinking about this for such a long time. I was like, man, because of COVID, right? With working home from COVID, I was like, I cannot go back to the office.
So first of all, I want you to send me that specific fatwa because it might be newer than the one that I've read. The one that I've read was very much specific to the country that it was issued in and very much specific to the banking system in that country.
So this is okay.
And very much specific to the Islamic banks of that country, if I recall.
Okay.
Meaning that the business activities of an Islamic bank that are earning halal earnings and distributing that to account holders is going to be very different than a conventional bank that is loaning at interest and then distributing that to its account holders.
But isn't the global financial system all tied together now?
That's not the
case?
when you're talking about the earnings of an individual company, right?
Okay.
Yes, there the global financial system is tied together.
But even if I go to an Islamic bank in whichever country and I take out a loan for a house, they're still going to tag on some interest on there, right?
Again, that has to do with how the contract is structured and what the liabilities are created. Are they simply buying a house for you and selling it to you as a markup, like we were talking about with the cameras and the cars, or are they loaning you the money, right, and then using the house as collateral? So it's two different things. The liabilities are completely different. In one, you are liable for the money, which is why you have a mortgage and you have a deed, right? So even if that home burns down, is taken in a legal settlement, is, a quick claim deed is written to your spouse because of a divorce or something like that, if your name is still on the mortgage, you still owe that money. You're still legally liable for that money. So your liability is money for money. It is not for, to surrender the house. The house is only surrendered as collateral when they can't collect financially.
And that's a typical loan. This is what we're describing.
And that's typical.
And
that's
we should not strive for these type of loans.
We should not strive for that. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation about like necessities and all of that kind of stuff. And then some states do it a little bit differently. And this is one of the contentions that I think is...
So that's why you're not always able to give a blanket answer. Because
exactly. Because the mortgage industry and the mortgage system in every country and in the United States, in every state, and sometimes even in different counties, is done differently. It works differently. So to say that, I have this fatwa from this area of the world, like I have a mortgage fatwa from, let's say, South Africa, would be wholly inapplicable to what's going on in the United States. People say, well, there's an option in Canada now that they're doing that. Okay, well, that option is in Canada because their regulatory system allows for certain things that allow them to do that. Might not be This is why even with, like, say, quote unquote, Islamic mortgage providers, and I have a lot of critique, for Islamic mortgage providers, people are like, well, if they're really providing mortgages, why aren't they in my state? They just don't want Muslims to. No, they're not licensed. They can't operate in your state because they're not licensed to, because they don't meet certain things. So the point being is that.
But don't they just go get the money from the government?
Not always. Some of them have private investors. Some use Fannie and Freddie. Yes. Some use private investors.
So why is it okay for them and not okay for me?
That is a huge question, and that's a question that I often bring up as well. Why is there a carve out for companies that are going to upcharge, but for me, if I were to try to get that wholesale rate, which generally you can't do, but there's some ways now because of technology. Why is that? That's a whole another discussion. As far as
I mean, right now it's free for them. In some cases, almost, yeah.
Almost
and they're going to charge me 3 points. Like, well,
yeah.
Why should I?
Almost.
Okay.
They're intermediary.
Yeah, that's okay. So there is no blanket answer.
There is no blanket answer. No.
So even that fatwa that was in the 90s about like, oh, you can have one loan for one home. I remember there was something about that.
Well, that was to say that, look, you guys in the United States and the West, you don't have viable alternatives. Having a home is necessary for a stable lifestyle. Islam recognizes the necessity of stability in life, and therefore, because of this necessity, you can go and buy a home, even if it's a conventional mortgage. So that fatwa is out there. I think for some people that does wholly apply to their lives.
So can you help us define what's a necessity? Like, all my friends are buying a home. Can I buy a home?
Right. So a necessity is something that. So there's a certain level. So there's a level of necessity, which means that you're going to risk life or limb, or long-term damage.
Yes.
Then a constant need, what they call al-haj al-mustamirra, right, or al-haj al-mulha. This is a need which, if not met, will eventually lead to a state of necessity, but in each individual instance is not a necessity in and of itself.
Okay.
Right. So yes, I can live day to day without having a home, right? But not having a home that I own over a period of a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years will significantly disadvantage me, right? And
Yes.
and bring about harm. So that's the argument that many of the scholars were saying, that they said, well, we're just going to use the darura, necessity, because it's easier concept to present to people, right? In reality, we're looking at, instead of looking at you owning a home for the month of July, we're talking about
10, 20 years.
10, 20 years. That's going to significantly disadvantage you. That's why they said, okay, if it's for your first home and this is the case, buy it. You have a dispensation to do so. If it's for an investment property, another property, so on and so forth, then don't, because there's not a constant need. That's like an accessory. It's a nice, it's a nice thing to have, but it's not something that you.
Okay.
Well, I feel like getting out of the corporate, rat race is a necessity. I'm sorry. Like after doing, you know what? It's fine. It's fine.
Okay. People aren't going to see my orange spray tan.
We'll VFX it in.
So I think in the mortgage area, there's a lot that can be said. Okay, in the financial, in the financial world, there's a lot to be said. And I'm not here to say one thing that I'm very big on is people. I tell anybody that wants to buy a mortgage, there's 3 things that you need to understand. Number 1, does this financial decision make sense for me and my family? Sometimes it is not the best decision to buy a home. Doesn't matter if you're doing it Islamically or conventionally. A lot of people who are renting don't realize the costs that go into owning a home. So does it actually, make financial sense? Or I would say, does it actually provide stability for my family? Now, number 2, does it make financial sense?
Yeah.
Am I being taken advantage of just because I'm a Muslim? I really think that Islamic mortgage companies need to be pressed. And I say this without any kind of rancor, any kind of hatred or trying to down on them. But if you want our money as a community, you need to tell us why. You can't be charging me like 3 points above market.
Yeah.
And say it's because you're a Muslim.
Oh, we got some fees or whatever, and you're like, what does all this mean?
Or you get to. I've heard this happen several times. Everything's kosher. You get the signing, and they're like, oh, there's an extra $6,000 of fees that you're going to have to pay. I've seen people have to walk away from deals or forced to like scrounge up money and get it. So it's impossible for something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made halal to be more detrimental than that which He made haram, right? So nobody can come and say cocaine is halal. Why? Well, it's not mentioned in the Quran. Right. What's more harmful than the alcohol the wine that he actually mentioned, the haram. Therefore, it's haram as well. Right.
Are there any of these Muslim financing companies or mortgage companies that you would recommend? Or
I don't recommend publicly any company, and the reason being is because
you're not on any board for any of.
I'm not on any board for any of the mortgage companies. No.
Okay. Just Zoya and
Zoya, and that's just a screening research tool. Yeah.
Okay.
We don't even do investments or anything like that.
You're not managing any funds.
Not managing any funds. No, it's just data. Okay. And one of the reasons why I like to keep it like that is because I can speak independently about these things without saying that I'm invested in seeing one of them. Now, some of them operate better than others. And that's like a whole other conversation. But, home ownership is important. And I think you guys have very unique circumstances here in California that probably none of us in the rest of the nation, maybe not, well, maybe Massachusetts.
Yeah, East Coast.
Yeah, maybe Massachusetts, but California has a market which is just
$1 million for a fixer-upper. That's accurate.
And the problem is what you were talking about. 10 years down the line, okay, maybe I can buy this $1 million home now, but 10 years based on market, it's going to go up. If you are in that same apartment, you're in over 10 years, you could be paying double rent.
Absolutely.
And you will most likely not be making double salary.
Absolutely.
You project that out. You're like, I'm either going to have to move away from my family, from my community, or do I buy this home? And I think at that point, maybe that's like, okay.
And people have actually called me and said, yeah, man, I'm ready to move out of California if it means that, if I can't buy a home. This is why I always encourage people to understand that fatwa is an individual answer.
Yeah.
The idea of like general public fatwas, group fatwas, this is very new, even in Islamic history. Fatwa has always been an answer to an individual's conundrum about the shari'ah, the permissibility of something.
So people, is that you give personal fatwas if
I do if they schedule with me and we go over all of the details, and I'll tell them based on their circumstances what I think is viable for them.
Okay.
There was another point.
And you do that on your website, right? Just so for the listener.
joebradford.net.
joebradford.net. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll put the links in the description.
Awesome. So there's three things. So it's, does this provide stability to my family? Number two, does it make financial sense? Number three, am I willing to stand in front of Allah with the decision that I've made? Too many people want, they want to show up on the day of judgment and be like, hold on, I got Joe here and I'm going to put him, he's going to answer. I'm going to run as far and as fast away from you as I can on the day of judgment. I'm not going to stand in front of Allah for anybody but myself. So you have to be confident. And that means that you have to educate yourself. You have to do your due diligence. And then if you make a decision and you go with a conventional mortgage, then be confident in that decision. I'm not saying that you have to announce it to everyone. I'm not even saying that you're doing something that is unequivocally haram. I don't say that because your personal circumstances may be different than the next person's. This is a problem where we equate all of our personal circumstances with each other's, and that's just not the case. But it's kind of like discussions of like medical marijuana and stuff like that now. But be like, well, it works for some people and therefore everybody should. No, if a person has a quantifiable need for it, that's different than a person that's like,
I'm stressed out.
I'm stressed out, doc. I
I
need
need a little bit of back pain.
I'm stressed out. My back hurts. I've just been so depressed. Well, what are you depressed for? Well, I haven't been able to get a prescription for medical marijuana. It's like, you're caught in this catch-22. So, so number one, does it provide stability for my family? Number two, does it does it make financial sense? Number three, am I willing to stand in front of Allah?
And I think
with
that's the big
decision? I think this is the big one. A lot of people struggle with this. I tell people, hey, if it's going to give you peace of mind to go out and use from an Islamic provider, even if you pay more, then go and get that peace of mind.
Inshallah, there be barakah. Inshallah, there be blessings in that decision.
Yes,
even
inshallah ta'ala, there will. And you know what? If your situation necessitates that you use something else, then you're doing a service to your family. And so you shouldn't feel like, I'm condemned to the hellfire because you've gone through the process of searching for what's right.
And I think that's the biggest difference. That mentality is different between someone who's like, who cares? Like it's a loan, like all other loans. I'm gonna get a house, and like I'm a young guy and I want to get my house now. I'm not paying rent. I'm gonna own my place.
Right.
I suppose someone who's like struggling with it, thinking like, man, I just can't afford it. Like I cannot put down whatever they need as my down payment for the Islamic loan. And like I have 4 kids, like there's just no way or else to go. That's such a different mentality when they pulling out this loan and living about it.
I think you make a good point. And I think even just this, it's not just about the circumstances, but it is very much about the mental process. الإثم ما حاك في صدرك وخشيت أن يطلع عليه الناس. حديث وابصة رضي الله عنه. The Prophet ﷺ said, sin is what shakes around in your chest. You're afraid of people finding out about. So the fact that you're troubled about something is a very good sign that you are concerned for your faith, you're concerned for your akhirah, and that should always be a concern. So like I tell people, we were talking about the 401ks, right? Somebody says, well, I've got this situation where like a part of my portfolio, they forced me to put it into fixed income and the rest of it I can choose something that was halal, but should I just pull it all out and not get anything? What should I do next year? Next year, set a date for yourself, reevaluate. You should always have this concern for your deen. You should always have this concern for your akhirah. So even when you are in less than optimal situations, you should always, in classical discussions, they talk about, a person who is, cut off in the desert and their horse dies and they have to like drink the blood of the horse and like take the meat of the horse. Does that mean that like I carry the meat as, and the blood is far as I can and just eat and drink off of that like it's nothing, even though I've passed by a well of water, even though no, you always have to reassess your situation. And so interestingly enough, reassessing your situation is a very core principle of personal finance. You always want to go and check your finances quarterly or at least bi-yearly, or please, for the sake of Allah, at least once a year. Go and review.
Yeah, you have to.
Go and review all of your stuff. And since this podcast is focused on young men, I think it's very important for young men, especially those who, for example, because of their financial troubles, they might feel that they're struggling to start a family, support their parents, right, in their old age, and generally just kind of keep up with everything.
Yes.
Plus, maintain the idea of qawama that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon them, the idea of being the maintainers of their wives and of their families. It's very important to be diligent about this stuff early on. A lot of guys run on autopilot. They don't care about it. And then when it gets too late, they're either steeped in debt, steeped in depression, or both. And they're going through problems with, now they're seeing, their house and half their wealth go through with a divorce because all of the problems have kind of led to unhappiness and all of that. So having this stuff right helps so much in the future with everything from family to nuclear family, parents, siblings, to creating your own family, getting married, having kids, to providing in the future. I mean, I get parents that come to me all the time. They're like, my kids want to go to college. Like, what options do I have for them? Well, you can look into this, but how old is your child? 17. Not much that you can do now, that they're 17 years old. It's different when they're 7 versus 17. Mm-hmm. So the earlier that you start as a young man investing, saving, doing this systematically, and understanding your finances, you are going to be better off to get married, to get better jobs, to stand up for your responsibilities. And I think that this is one thing that's kind of missing in society. It's not about saying that no, women shouldn't work, or that we're not talking about that. We're talking about men.
This is regardless of whatever your wife is doing, you have to have this as a man.
Yeah, exactly. Because, your wife might want to have a child and say, you know what, and her right Islamically is, I'm going to stay home and raise these kids. I'm not going to work. And guys who are kind of it's been inculcated into them, just look for a girl that's going to pay 50-50. Well, that's a roommate. That's not a spouse. And if you can't maintain a lifestyle without your spouse's income, then it's going to be very, very difficult for you when she wants to say, no, you know what, I'm going to be a mother for a while. And so, I just wanted to kind of like wrap that up with a bow, because it's important. We're not just talking about like random financial, things when we refer to all of this. There is a higher purpose behind it. Yeah. And that higher purpose is fulfilling your role as a man in society and in your family.
Yeah. And this doesn't matter because there's a trend now where there's stay-at-home dads, right? That kind of thing. So, regardless of whether your wife is working or not, she may be a doctor and you are whatever, you need to be working because that is your dignity as a man, right?
I can tell you even, if you look into some studies, psychological studies about it, the fact that you don't work and don't provide will have an effect on your relationship with your wife.
Yeah.
Women need to be able to provide their husbands the latitude to provide for them. It is something that is inherent to the nature of men. Men need to be able to provide for their families. It's something that's inherent to the nature of men. And we need to understand that there is that balance there. That's not saying that is the only thing that can happen.
But it's very important.
But it's a very
important
important
it should
thing.
Go into when you evaluate a spouse.
And there should be an understanding about that.
Yeah, what is your typical living situation? If she comes from a very well-off family and she expects to be maintained like that, and
which is her right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're not going to survive off love.
Or if she, or if Or if you are earning much less or not earning much at all, women have to be understanding as well. There were some of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ that were poor and their wives were wealthy. Ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was poor to the point that his wife Zainab went to the Prophet ﷺ and she said, I have extra money. I want to go and give it away in sadaqah. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is saying like, I should be spending it on my kids and the family. Like in the Prophet ﷺ said, that's the best sadaqah for you. Meaning it's not obligatory for a woman to spend on her family.
I didn't know that about Ibn Mas'ud.
Yeah, he was very poor. Actually, there's another hadith where one year he was so poor that she said, like, can I give him my zakat? And the Prophet ﷺ said yes.
Subhanallah.
Yeah.
Allah.
But no,
Islam is so beautiful.
She was a businesswoman in Medina. She actually made like handmade goods and things like that, would sell them in the marketplace after Jummah, right?
What?
Yeah. So my point in mentioning that is to say that if a man and a woman are in that situation, they need to have an understanding.
But Ibn Mas'ud still worked. He still was out there trying to grind, right? I'm assuming he wasn't just like
Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was very involved with knowledge and teaching, but he wasn't necessarily grinding, making money as far as I recall. No.
They weren't getting stipends. They weren't getting money from any. No
stipends. I haven't heard of that.
No, I was just assuming.
Yeah, my point in that is to say is that even somebody might say, well, you guys are talking about this, but my situation does. Okay, your situation doesn't provide for that, but that means that you have to have a very open, honest discussion with your spouse about what your situation is.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to fall into problems, and so and even in then, there's still a certain level of deference and respect that both spouses have to show to each other. But for most young men, I find that they are in financial disarray, and then they complain, well, I can't get married, I can't move out of my parents' house, I can't do this, I can't do that. It's because you haven't gotten your own stuff together. Like, get your situation together, everything else will fall in line. And if you can do that, the earlier that you can do that, I remember I was running some numbers. I think I even put it in like a highlight on my Instagram.
Yeah, I've been seeing it. Like, if you put this much money at this age and you do it over this amount of years, you can have this like millions of dollars.
Yeah, like if you're like 22 and you're putting like $50 a week, you just any leftover cash in your account at the end of the week, you just sweep it into an investment account and just invest that over and over again. Then by the time you're in your 40s, you're going to have maybe upwards of $750,000. By the time you retire at 65, you might have like $2 million. And this is just from not spending the money that's left over in your account.
And what kind of funds are like?
Just putting it into Amana Mutual funds. If you just put Amana Mutual Growth, which has like an average of 12%, even if you went low, like some people criticize me for using that. But Amana Mutual Growth has always...
I just saw a chart, actually, someone put out the Amana Mutual Fund and I think the Wahid Fund, they outperformed the S&P.
Yeah, they always have. They outperformed all of the Vanguard funds that they were based on as well. Because
that's what barakah.
A well-capitalized company is the best hedge against volatility and inflation. And so when you invest in companies that do not overextend themselves with interest-bearing debt, interest-bearing securities, or take on debt, but they're making money from the money that they have and managing it properly, they will have that barakah in what they're doing. So, the point being is that, invest and don't think that you're going to get anything less. You're actually going to get more if you use Sharia compliant funds. But it's more, and people like I'm picking stocks on Robinhood. I made this, I made that. But if you go
buy the dip, diamond hands.
Yeah, if you look at total return is probably going to be at a loss.
Yep.
But if you just consistently putting money into these funds, you're going to continuously see, and I can guarantee you'll see it on the charts. The moment you get over $10,000 in an investment account, you will automatically see an uptick in the way that you're earning. And every increment after that, you're going to start to see more and more. So the more the snowball rolls, the bigger it gets. And that's why starting early on these types of things is so important, And as a young man, taking your position seriously. You want people to take you seriously. You want your parents to take you seriously. You want your future spouse to take you seriously. You have to take your life seriously. And if you don't, you're going to end up with somebody who's not serious. and it's going to be it's going to be a whole other set of problems.
Yeah.
Inshallah. So last thing about this investment thing, because this is another thought I had, and it's come up before.
Do we have another out for Bitcoin? Or?
No, not Bitcoin, not Bitcoin. Here, that could be a whole nother. When you come back to Zakat, inshallah. Your risk is written. God, we know in Hadith, we know from many things that before I'm even born, how much I will earn in my life is preordained. So I invest. Like, I'm going to get that money one day anyway, right?
Why go to work?
Why?
But how are you going to get it? That's the question.
It's written, Sheikh.
If it's written, I'm going to find it on the floor.
Sure. I mean, you'll find it on the floor, or you'll be given, you'll be given the like thereof of barakah or some sin averted, in this life. It doesn't necessarily mean that, dollar for dollar, that's what's going to come to you. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لن تموت نفس حتى تستكمل رزقها وتستوفي أجلها. A soul will not die until it has lived out its lifespan and accumulated all of its wealth. فاتقوا الله وأجملوا في الطلب. So be mindful of Allah, be fearful of Allah, and seek beautifully. فإنما عند الله لا ينال بمعصيته. Because what's with Allah will not be gained through his disobedience. So yeah, you can go and do nothing, right, and end up with relatively nothing. You can go and disobey Allah and earning that and earn everything in the dunya but have nothing in the akhirah. Or you can go and obey Allah and have everything in the dunya as well as the akhirah. It has to do with your choice. How that rizq is distributed to you has to do with the choice, the A-B choices that you make along the path. Those A-B choices were set out for you by Allah, right? So He knows what is, what will be, and what could be. And therefore, when you choose A, and then now you've got another choice of A and B, and you choose B, all of that was determined as possible for you. Now, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا إِن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. You never will it, or you never will anything except that Allah has willed it, because you were put into this creation. But you're also expected to do what is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, that rizq will come to you. How do you want it to come to you? Do you want it to come to you with the stress and the harm and the hurt and the problems? Do you want it to come to you with the peace of mind and the safety and security that's there? That's how do you want, وَهَدَيْنَاهُ what's the verse? وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ, right? So, and we have guided man to the two steep inclines. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about two steep inclines? Most scholars of tafsir said this is the idea of khair and shar, good and evil, right? Righteousness and disobedience. Both of them are steep. Both of them take effort. Which of them is the best for you? You have to decide where you put your energy. You put your energy into righteousness, you're going to have, righteous results and beneficial results. You put it into disobedience, you might get some of that in this life, right? But in the next life, you're going to miss out.
Actually, the hadith, maybe this will motivate someone, I'll end it on this, that motivated me to actually start investing. Shaykh Jibril Hafizullah, he was talking about the hadith of the three men who get stuck in a cave. And each of them expresses something that they did exclusively for the sake of God. And by each of them expressing it, the boulder moves until they can all get free. First one fed his parents when his children were hungry. Second one avoided zina when it was as tempting as possible. Then the third guy, he was, I think they're different riwayat, but one of them is he was supposed to pay his workers, but one of them left before getting paid. So he took the money he was supposed to owe him and started investing it.
Right.
So the guy comes back one day and says, "Where's my money?" He says, "Oh yeah, this whole flock and herd, this is all yours."
Yeah, everything is value is yours.
He's like, "Don't mess with me." He said, "No, really, I invested it. It's all yours." So the guy took it all and went. He said, "Allah, if I did this for you, open the door," and he opened it and they went out.
Yeah.
So one of the lessons being like, if you have money, invest it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Be barakah in it.
Absolutely.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Joe.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair,
Inshallah, you're back
Sheikh
in SoCal. I know there's many more topics to discuss with you. Wasiyah, zakat, whatever else. But
Definitely.
Barakallah feek. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed our discussion.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, and with that, we'll say thank you, Sheikh Joe, for taking time right before your flight to sit with us in the studio today.
My pleasure.
Inshallah, I hope all the listeners benefited. And with that, this is Amr Mabrook with the Prophetic Mentality Podcast, signing off. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa barakatuh.